Welcome. Today we are looking beneath the surface of the multi-billion-pound DNA testing industry. Before we unpack the controversy, we need to understand the science. Understanding the science. Genetic science is simply put the study of genes. A gene is a section of a double helical molecule called DNA, which contains the code that dictates the inherent properties of a living organism. It explains why cats have kittens and humans have babies. But within a species, variations of these genes, known as alleles, is what makes us unique individuals. So how does a home kit read this code? The process begins when you surrender a biological sample, usually saliva, into a tube. Once it reaches the lab, they analyze the DNA using one of two main methods. Genotyping, most common, uses chips to scan for specific genetic variations or markers that you possess. Sequencing determines the exact sequence of a length of DNA. The use of reference panels. But having your code is only one step. To tell you where you are from, the company needs something to compare you against. They use reference panels. These are in databases of ancient ancestors. They are comprised of living populations. To build these panels, companies select living individuals who are considered good representatives of a specific region, usually people who can verify that all four of their grandparents were born in the same place. They use these modern people to estimate what populations looked like 200 to 300 years ago. The wall of incomplete data. Here is where the science hits a wall. The accuracy of your result is only as good as the data in that database. And right now, those databases are heavily skewed. The majority of data comes from populations of European descent, specifically American, British, and Australian customers. If you are of African descent, for example, your result may be frustratingly vague. Companies often have very few samples from Africa, meaning they cannot provide the detailed country-by-country breakdown they might offer a European customer. Without a diverse data set to compare against, the science cannot work effectively. The ethical danger of data acquisition. This lack of representation creates an ethical dilemma, making African data a valuable commodity. This is seen in massive government-to-government deals. This lack of informed consent or compensation for citizens underscores that for many companies, data is an asset to be purchased and exploited, which then gets used to inform your ancestry percentages. Contradictory results. This lack of representation leads to results that can be contradictory, misleading, or simply false. Because companies use proprietary databases with different data, you can get wildly different results from different tests. A lot of difference there. Take the case of Shana Danis. One test said she was mainly Central Asian. Another said her biggest match was China. A third said Mongolia. These tests are not delivering absolute truth. They are providing estimates and educated guesses based on incomplete data. Emotional fallout and false certainty. When these educated guesses are sold as hard science, they can dismantle a family identity that has been cherished for generations. Take Aisha Blackman, who grew up believing she had Indian heritage, a narrative woven through her family history. The test results showed no Indian markers at all, causing her to question her mother and her grandmother's fidelity and leaving her feeling like she had lost her place in her own tribe. Conclusion: the limits of percentages: 40%/60%. This lack of diverse, high-quality data is precisely why we must be skeptical of claims assigning specific percentages to ancient lineages, especially in regions like the Horn of Africa. Claims asserting that a population such as the Somalis are definitively 60% African and 40% Eurasian based on these tests are an example of this scientific uncertainty being sold as hard fact. This is a statistical estimation comparing population's DNA against a flawed, incomplete database. The reference panels simply lack the depth to differentiate ancient, complex Horn of Africa history into neat, universally accepted percentages. Critics argue that these companies are using ethnicity as a polished euphemism for race, trying to define biological categories that genetics have shown do not clearly exist. Ultimately, these tests are selling a probability, not a certainty. When marketing obscures the limitations of the database, customers are left treating a scientific guess, like a 40%/60% breakdown, as a verdict on who they really are. But that is not the truth.